So let's take a look at domain and range and info off of graphs again, maybe with some different techniques this time. So just to refresh, interval notation always has to go from small, comma, up to big. So either left to right or down to up. Not included gets parentheses, included gets brackets, and what do we put on the infinities? Always use parentheses. Okay, we're going to take a look at one technique that some people like, and that is the post-it technique. So I am going to first examine the domain by taking the post-its and going on the x-axis and just smushing into the graph as close as I can and only allowing myself to see how much x value do we see here. Okay, and then at the same time, if you'd like, you could also do the y-axis. So the y values go as low as this, all the way up to as high as that. Now that you could see the graph, we might be able to say its values. Okay, I'm going to have to move my post-it a little bit here just to kind of see what's going on. So first, let's take a look at domain. The domain goes from this point, which is -7, and since it's open, I'm going to use parentheses. So from -7 all the way up to, now there's no x value there, at 1, 2. So -2, open bubble, is going to get parentheses. And then we're going to continue on from -2 all the way up to, the highest that this graph reaches is 5, 6, 7, 8. But since that's an open bubble, I'm going to use a parentheses on 8. Okay. Should I zoom in a little bit so you guys can see these graphs a little better? I mean, I know you have yours in your packet. Okay, now for the y values. The y values go as low as this post-it and as high as that post-it. So the y values go from -5, but that's a bubble, so parentheses -5, all the way up to, now is there a graph here? Is -2 being used? And the answer again is yes. There is a point right here that's being used. So even though -2 is not being used there, he's being used somewhere, so let's keep going. Is this the highest the graph reaches? Nope. The highest the graph reaches is up here. 5, 6, 7, 8. And since that's an open bubble, I will use parentheses. Okay? Now instead of post-its, because some people don't like carrying these around, they use highlighters, and this might be a technique you can use. So let's take a look at domain by highlighting the boundaries. So for number 2, this graph goes all the way up to here and then stops on the x-axis and all the way up to, oh wait, there's an arrow, it keeps going. So I'm not going to put a stop on it. So what's the domain for this graph? It goes all the way up to -8, but that's a closed point, so brackets from -8 all the way up to, oh, let's stop and take that bubble out, up to 1. We'll use a parentheses, and then we'll union continue on 1 all the way to infinity, always gets a parentheses. Okay, now we can do the same thing on the y-axis. So one of your options is to take a sticky and go up the y-axis and say the graph starts there, or we could just kind of highlight. The graph goes from here up to, oh wait, there's an arrow. It goes up, up, up. So there is no boundary on the top. Okay, so the smallest y value being used is 0 with a bracket. Is that value being used? Is 4 being used? Definitely being used. And the highest y value, up, 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 would be infinity. Okay, so perhaps highlighters are a good technique. Let's take a look at number 3. You can use whatever technique you want. I think I'm just going to start looking at the graphs and people can individualize for themselves. The domain is the set of x values. So this graph goes down, down, down forever. There's no asymptote drawn, so don't assume that it's going to stop there at -8. It definitely crossed -7. It's getting closer and I think it's going to cross -8. Same thing here. This graph definitely crossed 6. It's getting really close to 7. No one drew an asymptote. That's going to go forever. So the smallest x number is -infinity. And x values are being used everywhere. Oh, little local max. There's some x-intercepts. Wait a minute. 5 has a hole. So how do you say a hole? 5 parentheses union parentheses 5. Now we'll keep going, all the way to infinity. How about the range for this one? The smallest y value, smallest y being used is -infinity. And let's go up the y-axis. Yep, graph. Oh, wait a minute. Is there a graph here? There's no other place where 3 is being used. So 1, 2, 3 does not have any y values. So let's say 3 with parentheses, union 3 to infinity. Okay, these are some interesting graphs today. Some different stuff is happening. Number 4 has a random hole right there, has a solid point, a hole, down forever. This graph definitely goes off the graph paper, so we'll exaggerate that. The domain is the set of x values, smallest x. Oh, there's no -10. The smallest x that this graph touches is -6. Parentheses or bracket? How about a bracket on that guy? Okay, and then does it go forever? Well, wait, no, there's no graph here. What x value is that? That's an x value of 0. So parentheses, don't use 0. And do a union. Start again at 0, but parentheses, still don't use 0. So just stop using 0 and keep going all the way to infinity. Yep, 10's being used. 11 will be used, yes. Let's take a look at the range. Smallest y value being used. Does the graph touch -10? Absolutely. In fact, it goes down. So that's -infinity. Okay, there's graph at -8. -5 is being used. Is this number being used? No. Nowhere? Nowhere. -2 is not being touched as a y value. That's the point 0, -2. Sometimes it helps people to see that number. Union, parentheses, -2, all the way up to, oh wait, there's no graph up there. Okay, so for sticky note people, what they would have been doing was putting a sticky note all the way down to here saying, wait people, the graph stops there. All the way up to that value, which is 4, but no higher than 4. And that's a closed point, so we will use a bracket on it. Okay. Oh, 5 looks juicy. What's going on with this one? There's an asymptote there. The graph is approaching on both sides, getting closer on the left, closer on the right, but nowhere is the graph touching -2. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so domain. What's the smallest x? The graph goes farther this way, so definitely uses -infinity. All the way up to, let's see, x. There's no touching at -2, so let's take that out. Parentheses, union, parentheses, -2. And it touches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, this graph goes forever, so it goes to infinity. All right, what about the range, the smallest y? I know it's getting closer and closer to -2. It never touches, so it goes forever. So that y value is going to be -infinity. Okay, does the graph use all these negatives? Does it touch 0? Does it touch 1, 2, 5, 10? The graph goes up. I think it uses all y values. You could say that, or you could even say all reals. And the last one. I have a little squiggle going on here. but we have an open bubble, we have a hole. Up, down, up forever. Let's just exaggerate the graph. That is not an asymptote, so we're going to go off to the right slowly, but definitely to the right. So the smallest x value being used, smallest x value, the smallest one is -5, but that's an open bubble. So -5 is going to get a parentheses and keep going along the x-axis. Keep going. It uses 5. It's using 6. It's taking a while, but it will use all the way up to infinity, with parentheses, of course. And let's take a look at the range. Smallest y value. Smallest y value is here, -5. So we're going to have -5 with parentheses, and it goes up, 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 up. And even though it maxes out here, don't worry, there's more graph over here. The graph's touching 3, touching 4, all the way to infinity. Okay, let's turn to the next page and take a look at one of these monster graphs. Answer some questions about it. So I see a hole, and a hole, and a hole. Holy cow. And an asymptote. So this graph is getting closer and closer, but not touching that number right there. Okay. What is the domain of this graph? So I'm going to take a look at the smallest x value being used. The graph does not go past this asymptote, and that asymptote is at 5, 6, 7, -8. Okay, so the smallest number being used is -8, but it's not touching -8. So let's parenthesis it up. And then the graph goes and goes and goes, but wait a minute, it doesn't use this x number. So we're going to say -5 with parentheses. Okay, then let's union it up, keep going. And then the graph keeps going from -5 all the way until, oh, there's another hole. Does not use x value of 3. So 3 parentheses union parentheses 3. We're going to keep going. Oh, wait, then the graph stops at 7. And since that's a hole, doesn't touch, parentheses that one up. Wow, it's a lot of parentheses. What is the range? Okay, the smallest y value being used is not -infinity. This graph stops right here, and that is at -5. And since that's a closed point, we're going to say brackets -5. Okay, does the graph touch -4? Absolutely. -3, -2. Does the graph touch -1? Yep, it sure does. Even though it's not using it on the right, it's definitely using -1. It's touching 0. Touching 1. Is the graph using 2? Not there. Not there. Oh, wait a minute. It's not using 2 anywhere. Not using 2 anywhere. So we're going to say all the way up to 2. Parentheses, union parentheses, start back up at 2. Okay, does it use 3? Yep. Does it use 4? Yep. 5? Yep. 6? Yep. Up, 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 all the way to infinity. For what values is f of x equal to 0? Equaling 0, there's 2 places he equals 0. The first place is -1, 2, 3. X equals -3 touches 0, and 1, 2, 3, 4. X equals 4 touches 0. Okay? That helps me understand this next part because it says, for what numbers? Where is the graph greater than 0? Where is the graph? Where is the graph above the x-axis? That's what this question is asking. Or equal to. Above or equal to the x-axis. So I'm going to cover up below the x-axis and not even let you see any of that. Here is graph above the x-axis. And here is some graph above the x-axis. Don't fill in that hole. Okay, so I've got a piece and a piece, and I've got a piece. I got 3 pieces where the graph is above. Start on the left. starting at -8. The graph does not touch, so we'll use parentheses. The graph goes and goes and goes and goes until that value right there. -5 is a whole, parentheses, union. -5 all the way up until here. Now, since it said equal to 0, I can use that point I want where it equals and touches the 0, and that value is -3. Bracket it up. Okay, and here's another piece, so union. Here's a piece that's equal or greater, starting at 4, brackets 4, going all the way until x value of 7. Now that point is clearly above the x-axis, but it's an open, empty hole. There's no graph there. So let's use a parenthesis. Okay, hopefully you're able to follow along with no problems today.